So today there is no book of the week. Well, I guess there is, and it's the workbook. I'm going to share some of the updates to the workbook and the checklist. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but I'm not doing one of those book of the week things this week. So let's give everybody just another minute for some more people to pop on because I see people still jumping in. If you've got questions, get them into the Q&A section and we can go through those today. And by the way, actually, I'll give you a book recommendation. For those of you who love buying more books and stacking your shelves with books, Choose by Ryan Levesque. You may have read another one of his books called Ask. And Ask by Ryan Levesque, it's a great book. He sells information products. So he's selling online courses and books. And he's tested out a lot of things, and he goes through the science of how to create these things, but also how to market them, how to get it done. So Choose is, I haven't read it yet. I have a friend who told me all about it and he's sending it to me, but it sounds like a great book for figuring out your title and exactly what you're going to write about and your audience. It kind of ties in with a lot of things we talk about related to Genius Zone and ideal audience and things. And having read Ask by Ryan Levesque, I'm sure that Choose is awesome. So I'm excited to read that. If you've already read Choose by Ryan Levesque, let me know what you think of it. I'd love to hear about it. All right, we're at the hour. So let's get started here. So I'm going to jump right into sharing my screen here because I told you I was working on the checklist and I've got some checklists to show you. Now, it's not finished because it's a lot more work than there was no way I was going to be able to finish this week. But I'll show you what I've got and what's coming. So this is the Published Author 6 months to your book checklist. And now, before we get into the checklist, I want to make something clear, which is this is not the only way to write a book. There are lots of different ways to write a book. This is just one method amongst thousands of different checklists or systems or methods that you could use. And it's not designed to be a lockstep thing where you say, oh, I've got to check every single box on here. That's not how this works. This is a bunch of suggestions. It's the way that I recommend doing it, but that depends on your circumstances, and everybody has different circumstances. So some of these things, these check items might apply to you. You might look at some and say, oh, I've already done that. Others, you might say, I don't need to do that. For example, I mean, I've got a checkbox on here that talks about finding a ghostwriter. Well, if you're not using a ghostwriter, you're going to skip that. And there are a lot of others that you might say, doesn't apply. Great, skip it, no problem. This isn't like a test in school where you have to answer every question or you get in trouble or something. It's a resource. It's a bunch of suggestions. It's one way to do things. Everybody should customize this to work for them. But with all that said, here's the way that it's laid out. So this is laid out on a 6-month program to get you from absolute scratch, zero, nothing, to holding a book in your hands in 6 months. I know this is possible because I know people have done it in 2 weeks. And my wife did it in less than 2 months. And so I know that it's possible to get a book out there fast. I don't necessarily recommend it because you won't have a life or anything else during that time that you're working on the book. But what I'm finding is a lot of people, 12 months is a little bit long for them. They want to get it done faster than that. However, anything under 6 months is really rushing things. It's pretty tough. So that's why I chose 6 months. So if you want to do this in 6 months and use it as a 6-month checklist, great. If you want to stretch it out so that it's 12 months, great. If you want to stretch it out so it's 5 years, great. Whatever works for you. I interviewed a guy for the Published Author podcast the other day, and he took 5 years to write his book. And he's glad that he took 5 years to write it because he feels like it's a better book. And that might be the path that you're on. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. There are no rules here, but I just set it up as a 6-month thing because got to choose something, and it seemed to be the middle of the road type of arrangement. So this, rather than being a resource like the workbook where it's just a bunch of information and you can go through it any which way that works for you, I laid this out so it's month 1. here's what you do. Month 2, here's what you do. Month 3, here's what you do, all the way through to month 6 when you publish your book and you launch it. So in month 1, I'm not going to go through each one of these things. And also, this refers to the workbook. So you might read things on the checklist here, and it's parts of it are saying, go read this part of the workbook and complete that part. And even when it says things like find your why, well, what does that mean? Well, you have to read the workbook to figure out what I'm talking about when I have this check mark item, find your why, or pick a measure of success, or name your fears. What are these things? It's all referring to the workbook. So this is a checklist that you couldn't just pick up this checklist and go through it. You would have to have the workbook as a companion. So it's definitely part of the workbook and integrated with the workbook. It's not a standalone type of checklist. In fact, this is the outline for the revised version of the workbook. So as you look at this, the workbook is going to be laid out the same way, so that the same order that things are on this checklist, that's pretty much the same way that things are going to be laid out in the revised version of the workbook that's coming. So what I got through on the checklist here is now, I would love feedback on this too. So, as I'm going through this, if you have suggestions and you say, have you thought about doing it this way? Or what do you think about this? I'd love to hear any feedback that you have. So, there's the get started part of the workbook, which is welcome. And this is how the workbook works. Here's the introduction. That's that part. So, you read that part. And then there's that fast start checklist. And the reason I put the fast start checklist in the workbook is I wanted people to feel like they were making progress right from the get-go, that they had accomplished something, that they had made, they had something tangible to look at very quickly. I didn't want to give everybody 200 pages of reading so that people get 150 pages in and they feel like, man, I've read so much stuff, but I haven't actually done anything. I wanted people to feel like I've done something right off the bat. So that's why there's that fast start checklist in there. And so this goes through that, which most of you have already seen in the workbook. And then we go through foundation, which is the 7 systems of influence, working out your genius zone, audience, content, all of that stuff. In the workbook, this has changed a little bit, just in not the 7 systems themselves, but for example, on System 6 collaboration, I had a lot of material, I realized, in the workbook. Just as I'm introducing the 7 systems, there was pages of stuff about collaboration. I moved all that to a later part of the workbook, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the next part of the checklist is talking about your platform, which I use the word platform interchangeably with your thought leadership system, but nobody calls it your thought leadership system. So I thought I'm going to call it your platform because that's what everybody else talks about is your platform. So, well, I should say the platform is part of your thought leadership system. So when I talk about platform, we're talking about your website, your social media profiles, that basic stuff, your LinkedIn presence, those things. So that's your platform. So we talk about that, of course, in the workbook. And so this is the checklist for that. This part, your team, is a new part of the workbook that did not exist before. Bits and pieces of it existed spread throughout the workbook, but I put this all in one place because some of you are going to outsource a lot of work. Some of you are going to outsource a little bit. Regardless, it's good to know what you're going to be relying on other people or companies or services for earlier in the writing process. And so I wanted to explain all the different types of individuals, services, companies that you might be working with so that you could work that into your plan. What I'm finding is that I wouldn't say a lot, but a number of the people that I'm working with are getting to the later stages of the workbook and saying, you know what? This is a lot of work. I don't have time for this, but I really want to get a book out there. What can I do? And then I suggest, well, you could work with a ghostwriter. And they say, oh, I wish I'd known that from the beginning. I would have just chosen that route to begin with. And so I want people to think through this a little bit early on and select into the group that says, I'm going to do this all myself, or I'm going to hire people, ghostwriters, or I'm going to find co-authors, or I'm going to find other ways to make this a lot faster and easier to get this done. And there, again, there's no right way or wrong way here. This author that I spoke to the other day, who worked on his book for 5 years, I asked him, I said, how come you didn't hire a ghostwriter to help you get it done? And he said, that wasn't the point. He wanted to write it by himself. He said, I didn't want to have a ghostwriter. I wanted to do it all by myself. I wanted it to be 100% my words. And so hiring a ghostwriter just wasn't something I was going to do. And I wanted to spend time on it. I wanted to make sure it was the right book when it came out. That's great. I've talked to other people who say, I don't have time to write anything. I have one client right now that I'm coaching. He doesn't know how to type. Makes it kind of hard to write a book, 200 pages, when you don't know how to type. So he said, I don't write, I don't type. I don't really want to write a book, but I want to have a book with my name on it because it's going to be valuable for my business. So we've connected him with a ghostwriter, and he's going to hire a ghostwriter and talk to the ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter will write up the book. So again, there's no right and wrong, but it's something that we need to talk about early on in the process so that you don't waste time going down one path when really you should be on the other. So I've introduced this team section into the workbook, and I'm finishing that up right now as I revise the workbook. And then we get into this part is a little bit new. I rewrote some things about talking about your book's promise. This is replacing what I was calling the one-liner before. I feel like the book's promise explains better what the one-liner is all about. So there's been some rewriting there. There's actually been rewriting kind of all over the place in the workbook, but you'll find that 95% of the content is still the same stuff that you've already seen. There are some things about creating a book promotion plan and what you need to be doing earlier so that when you're ready to launch, you're really ready to launch and you have that and you're not scrambling to set up your promotion plan at that point. So there's some of that going in there. And we get all the way down to researching your book, and we're still just in month 1. So that's the way I've set it up. And then in month 2, we actually start doing the writing. You've done your research, you've got your platform set up, all that. And then in month 2, you start working on your vomit draft, and you're finishing your first draft, you're getting into your second draft, and you're recruiting people to write blurbs and your forward and all that stuff. So this is where the checklist starts to get a little bit messy because I'm still working on this down here, but at least that gives you a sneak peek of what's coming. And then switching over here to the actual revised part of the workbook. So this is my master copy that I'm working on right now, and you'll see we're up to, I think we're up to 294 pages in Google Doc format. So we've got 294 pages here, plus I know there are at least 50 other pages in another document that I'm working on, which is the messier part. This part's all pretty much done, polished up, and ready to go. But yeah, so I'll be releasing the checklist pretty soon, and I'll also be releasing this revised version of the workbook, at least as far as it's complete, to you, which will mostly be pretty much what you've already got, but in a different format. So if you've worked through the workbook and you're like, oh man, now I got to go through this and do it all over again. No, you're not going to have to do it all over again. You'll be able to look at this and say, okay, I've already done this and this and that. And then there are some new parts here. And I'll make sure when I post this that I say, here are some parts you want to take a look at because they're brand new. Here are some parts that have been revised a little bit that you might want to take a second look at. So also, Virginia was asking in the Facebook group about a roadmap, and I'd totally forgotten. There is a roadmap in the workbook that I specifically call the roadmap. So Virginia, there's a roadmap in the workbook. It's actually in the documents you already have, but it's also in here, and I've made a few little tweaks to that as well. So when this comes up, you'll be able to see that. All right, so let's get back to the screen and your questions, and let's dive into what you want to be talking about. If you have questions about the workbook, about the checklist, any of that stuff, then let's get into it. All right. Gene says, I'm already going on 3 years for my book. Great. Just means it's that much better of a book. So, okay. And Gene has the first question as well. Can I get some quick feedback for my upcoming launch? There are 3 pages. just some quick comments before I begin promoting it next week would be awesome. Okay, so Jean has a couple of pages here. So I'm going to open those and then let's go back to sharing the screen and let's take a look at these and make some comments. By the way, I just got approved the other day finally for LinkedIn Live. So now I can stream video on LinkedIn Live. I feel like I was blacklisted or something. I feel like I'm one of the last people to get it, but finally I got it. So now I can do streaming video on LinkedIn, and I'm looking forward to doing some streams talking about books and publishing and writing and all that stuff. If anybody's an expert on LinkedIn Live, let me know because I just got it. So I'm researching it and trying to figure out how to do it and everything. But if you've used StreamYard and all that stuff and you have any tips, let me know. Okay, so we're looking at Jean's pages here, and let me make sure I know what I'm looking at with each page here. So this is the landing page, I believe, right? So, all right, so I'm just letting it sink in here, just absorbing it for a second. Okay. And by the way, that video in the background, having lived in China, like that's not even sped up or anything. That's just literally what China looks like 24/7 is just like that. In fact, it even looks busier than that. I'm kidding, but seriously, it's that's like a calm moment in China. Okay, so a few comments real quick, just on design stuff, Gene, is this text here, the white text is kind of disappearing a little bit into the background. Um, it's a little bit easier to see as the light changes a bit, but it's just a little bit hard to read some of this text here. And with the smaller text, it's actually a little bit easier to read, but it depends on what time of day is showing in the background. Uh, this button here, this is good in the sense that it's really bright and it's big. Now, affiliate partner program. Okay. It might be good to give people an idea up here of how much they can make as part of your affiliate program. This is what you see on a lot of affiliate programs is right up front, they're going to say, you get 50 bucks for every sale or 500 or 5,000 or whatever it is. But they give you some idea of what you're actually going to make or what the potential is, which is how people judge whether it's worth their time to sign up for this and actually market it. So you might want to think about putting something up there that just gets right to the point that this is how much you could be making off of this affiliate program. Sometimes people hide that information and then I find out and I'm like, oh man, if I'd known I could make that much off the affiliate program, I would have been pushing your stuff 2 years ago, but I assumed it would be 50 bucks or 100 bucks, but now you're telling me it's $2,000. Wow, I had no idea you were paying out that much. So it's good to put that out there. With this graphic over here, the color competes a little bit with the button. That's getting a little bit nitpicky. I mean, people can figure out that they're supposed to click on the button here, but the yellow and there's a lot of conflict here in terms of activity, right? Because you've got the video going in the background. So that's drawing your eye to it. You've got this graphic with you speaking, this bright logo, this lightning bolt affiliate program, the flags in the background. There's a lot of activity there. So my eyes are kind of going all over the place. And then when I see white text on a background like that, that's very active. And then all of that is competing with the button, which is what you really want people to click on. So potentially simplifying this a bit so that that button pops out a little bit more. But again, people can kind of figure this out. Launch day, live workshop. Okay, so now my question is, if this is you said this is your landing page. Actually, I guess, is this the, okay. So Gene says this is the affiliate registration page. Okay, good. Because I was going to say, if this is your landing page, then I'm a little bit confused. Okay, I'm still a little bit confused because launch day live workshop, is this a workshop for people who want to sign up as affiliates or something else? I would assume that this would be a workshop for people who want to sign up as affiliates, but there's nothing explicitly saying that in this part. And so it's a little confusing as to whether this is just kind of something else you're doing. And maybe if you're interested in being an affiliate, maybe you want to check this out because it's related. Or is this, hey, if you want to be an affiliate, this is a launch day live workshop specifically for affiliates? I would make that, well, if it's not for affiliates specifically, I'd take it off. And if it is for affiliates, I would make it blindingly obvious that this is a workshop for affiliates, that anybody who wants to be an affiliate definitely wants to catch. Okay, and you've got your FAQ down here. There's the commission rate. Okay, great. So you've got the details there. I might just put some of that up above so that people know right at the top, and then that gets them interested in reading the rest. What do I need to do next? Referrals, commissions. It's kind of a lot of questions here. I think you could probably remove some of these because it's a little bit overwhelming. And some of these questions people probably won't ask until after they sign up. I mean, like, how do I use my affiliate coupon code? I don't think that's the type of question that people need answered before they're willing to sign up for the affiliate program. But things like, how are commissions calculated, or what's my commission rate? Obviously, people want that information before they sign up. So I might look at this and see if I could remove any of these questions that aren't absolutely necessary. Okay. So, okay. So again, this seems to be marketing the program that people are selling rather than marketing to the affiliates. I would really strip this down. I would take all this out. I mean, I'd have a link somewhere saying, here's what you're going to be selling, but I wouldn't put all the information on here because it makes me feel like, well, what I have to ask, what is this? Do I need to read this? And there's a lot of stuff here. So it starts to feel like, gee, this is a lot of work trying to figure out what this is, and is this for me if I'm interested in being an affiliate. So if it's not directly related to the affiliate program, I would remove it entirely and just strip it down, simplify it as much as possible. All right, so let's take a look at the, I think that's the landing page, right? Okay. So I'd think about switching the save 50% to a dollar amount, because 50% off of $50, who cares? 50% off of $10,000, that's a big deal. Let's see. The video is cute, but and it's fun to see your son, right? Your son there, but I'm not sure this is going to be a selling point for getting people converted, and it makes the page load slower, and then people are wondering if they have to watch this, if there's any other information there. Okay, so maybe there is other information there. Um, and maybe there's some sound or something that makes it make sense or something. But anyway, people don't have a lot of patience. And so this goes 11 minutes. It's going to have to be a really gripping, exciting video to get people to stay on for 11 minutes of watching. And so I I would look at that and see if you can strip it down to be more like a 1 to 2 minute long video and have it be really quick and really punchy and get right to the point, the value of what they get if they sign up. Um, the counter is good, although when it's 53 days away, that is a bit away, but of course it is when it is. Um, it's a lot of text. This is getting to good stuff here, which is your ideal audience, Gene, is having a conversation in their head right now about a problem that they have that they wish they could figure out how to solve. And you want to interject yourself into that conversation in their head so that they say, this guy has the exact or the solution to the exact problem I'm dealing with right now. And we want to get to that as quickly as possible. Solving China's unknown unknowns doesn't interject into that because it's not providing an obvious solution. One of the things I posted about on LinkedIn the other day, and I posted it in the group as well, was talking about the promise of your book and how the promise needs to be. What were the three things that I said? It was specific, obvious, and I can't remember. Um, if anybody remembers that, put it in the chat. I'm drawing a blank as to what I said yesterday. Where's my chat window? Chat. Yeah, my chat disappears. Anyway, so, but the promise of your book is the same thing as the promise for your course in that you want that promise to be very clear, easy to understand, quick, and specific. And so, right here, solving China's unknown unknowns. It's not clear to me what that means if I'm doing business in China. I mean, this could really be targeting anybody. It doesn't even tell us that you're targeting business people or people doing business in China because this could be tourists. It could be going after people who are doing travel. And so it's not clear. I'm not saying you have to change that, but I'm saying somewhere you need to really quickly get into this is who this is for, and this is the promise. This is what you're going to get out of it. This is the result that you're going to get. And the example I was giving in that post that I made the other day was that it's nice if the book says, I'm going to help you be successful. Great. But what does that mean? Well, I'm going to help you become rich. Okay, that's a little bit more specific. But this book will help you make $10 million in the next 6 months. That's much more specific about what it's getting at. Because somebody can say, I'm going to help you become rich. Well, is that over a 40-year period, like through wise retirement planning? Or is this over a 2-year period because you've got a hot investment in a new startup that I should get into? Those are two very different solutions to this promise of I'm going to help you become rich. And some people are very interested in one of those and not interested in the other at all. And the faster you tell people, I've got something that meets your needs, the more connection you're going to get and the more signups you're going to get. So I think that's more of an overall thing, not just this landing page, but with your book, with everything. What is that promise and how specific can we make it and how quickly can we get that out there? And this gets a little bit closer to it. Improve how Chinese perceive you, unlock real Guangxi, communicate with less frustration. But again, this could apply to tourists or it could apply to a lot of things other than perhaps the target audience that you're really going after. So how can we make it just drop dead obvious throughout this entire page, starting at the top, that this is a solution for a specific problem that a specific type of person has. And I think that needs to be more clear. Otherwise, if I didn't know Eugene and I just happened on this, I'd be like, eh, I'd come to this page, something about China, but who is this really for? And I'm trying to skim this content here and, you know, mastermind, uncover unknown unknowns, communicating with Chinese people, create new, more positive interactions. But why? What value does this give me? How does this help me? Um, it's not clear who, if this is speaking to me or somebody else, or what problem it's really solving there. So I think that's the biggest thing that we need to work through here. So, and then this was your thank you page. Um, so it's again, most people don't read anything at all. And so whenever you put a lot of text on stuff, it's very rare that people are going to go and read through this. And so there's a choice to be made as to what do you really want people to do here? What's the one thing that you want them to do, and how can you make it obvious that that's what you want them to do? And I think what you want them to do is you want them to download the worksheet. And so you've got this big red button, but it's still competing with all these other distractions that might prevent them from clicking on that. Now, if they click on that and they actually use it, then that makes them more connected to you. But it's unlikely that somebody's going to read all of this on a thank you page and go through all this. I mean, they could. And that's how we get trapped into creating lots of content is we say, well, maybe somebody does want to read all this. Maybe there is one person out there who will read this and they'll sign up because they read it. Well, yeah, but what about the 1,000 people that it's going to get in their way and they don't download this because they get distracted by all the other content? Whoops, let me move that out of the way. So those are some of my suggestions. Hopefully that's helpful, Gene, and hopefully helpful to some of the others of you who are working on your landing pages and such. So let's go back to that. Okay. All right, we got a bunch of questions in here, so I'm going to try to rip through some quick. So, all right, Sue says, can't wait to get this outline. I tend to be more organized with outlines. I think we all are. That's why I'm creating that checklist. Hope it's helpful. Shlomo, did you ask for LinkedIn Live? I think I've asked ages ago. I'm still out. Yes, I've asked for it several times, maybe 10 times. There's a submission form. And finally, this time I did it and it worked. So maybe the 10th time is the trick. And if you need a link to that, Shlomo, let me know. I can probably dig it up or you can probably Google it and find it. In fact, I think that's actually how I found it is I just Googled LinkedIn Live sign up or something like that. And I found it, signed up, and then this time it worked. Sue, by doing the meetings with Gene, I now understand what he is doing. Why? So when I look at his information, I understand what he is doing. Important to do these meetings to get to know the other person. I wish other people would take advantage of this. Yeah, definitely meet up with Gene. This is kind of the problem, though, Sue, specifically talking about Gene's material is if you get to know Gene, you understand what he's going after, but the people he's going after won't know who he is necessarily. They might be coming in cold, and we want to make sure that they see this and they just know immediately, oh, this is something that's for me. This fits me and my problem. Okay, Lenya, I have a bit of an issue with one of the people I've interviewed. He's a 90-year-old marketing professor. Wow. And only wanted to respond to my questions via email. Fine. The problem is that I asked him 3 times for signing the release and he is not replying. We chatted via email, so potentially I have proof that he shared his answers. However, I need his name and bio to market the book and include him in the list of interviewees too. What can I do? Good question. So, uh, I would keep following up, Elenia. I mean, maybe he's out of town. I guess how long I mean, if you've been following up for a week or two, then who knows? Maybe he's out of town or something. If you've been following up for 2 months, then that's a little bit odd. And I mean, he could be sick. There could be a lot of explanations still. He got sick, he got behind or something. But I guess the question we're really asking is there a problem with the release and he's just avoiding that issue because he doesn't want to sign it? And that's what we'd really be concerned about. And so you could try to guess at what his exact concern might be and send an email saying, hey, you might be concerned about this, and maybe that's keeping you from signing the release, but let me clarify things. If you think there might be any sort of misunderstanding, you could follow up with that. And you said that he only wanted to respond to your questions via email, but maybe you could give him a call if you have his number just to say, hey, I just need to get that release form from you and just figure out what the status is on that. Now, let's say that you just can't get a hold of him no matter what you do, but you've got this material that you want to include in the book. Sure, you can take a risk. I mean, he signed up knowing what he was getting into, right? Knowing that you were interviewing him because you wanted to include this in a book. As long as you, Melania says, I don't have his number, found his email on the internet. You might be able to do some sleuthing and figure out what his number is, but let's just assume that you can't get a hold of him. He's not responding. Do you go ahead and publish this without the release form, or do you not include it because you never got the release form? Most people are not the type of people who, if you reach out to them and say, I want to interview you for my book, and then you don't get a release form and then you publish it, most people are not going to come back and say, hey, I never signed a release form. I'm going to sue you because you included this in your book, or I want it removed. I mean, that's the whole reason they spoke to you in the first place, was under the understanding that their words were going to be in the book. If you feel like that is clear, then I wouldn't be too worried about including his responses in the book because, yeah, you've got the emails to show, hey, this is the whole reason we are doing these interviews was to put this in a book. He clearly understood that. And Elenia says he's quite famous. It's very important that I can include him. So yeah, if you feel like he knows, like he's a reasonable person and he knows that you are going to include this in the book, I would probably include it. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not supposed to be saying such things, and a lawyer wouldn't say such things because lawyers always advise on the side of caution. But it's, if it were me, would I take the risk? Yeah, I would probably take the risk and include it and deal with the fallout later, which would be pretty easy to do just by showing the emails. So something somewhat similar to this happened to me on the Chief Marketing Officers at Work book, in that I interviewed 30 CMOs, and one of them was the CMO for Twitter. And after the interview, she said, you know what? I'm actually leaving Twitter and I'm going to a new job. And she had said, she didn't really say anything negative about Twitter, but she did talk about some challenges they were facing. And she said, I spoke to my lawyer and mentioned this interview, and he was like, nope, no way. You can't let that be published. So she said, I'm sorry, but I can't sign the release form. I can't allow you to publish the interview that you did with me. And it was all edited, ready to go, everything. She had approved it. But then at the last minute, she came back and said, no, lawyer said I can't do it. So I've got it. I've got the Twitter CMO interview in my files, but nobody else has ever seen it. And it didn't get published in the book. So that was a different situation because she explicitly said, do not include this in the book. But if she had never gotten back to me, but she still hadn't signed the release form, I probably would have gone ahead and published it. I mean, I would have tried to get a hold of her, but if I hadn't been able to, I probably would have gone ahead and published it because that's why I reached out to her. And if she had come back and said, hey, I never signed anything, I would have said, hey, like, come on. You sent me all these emails. We did the interview, everything. You knew why I was using this. And I think it would be very hard for somebody to bring any sort of real case against you. And why would they want to in the first place? So Elenia says he knows about the book. He also said that he was only going to answer my question if I'd publish as if it was an interview with him. So, well, as long as you're following what he wants, then again, I'm entering into this gray area here because we're talking about legal stuff here, and I'm not supposed to do that. But I'd probably go ahead with it and I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now, if you're working with a professional publisher, they would probably say, no, we're not putting it in there unless we get the release form. But when you're self-publishing, you have a little bit more leeway there. Shlomo, can I get feedback on my LinkedIn cover? Changed with the book I published. All right, let's take a look. I also find it's really hard to do one that will fit desktop and mobile. Yes, that can be tricky sometimes, making one graphic that looks good on everything. So let's take a look at Shlomo's LinkedIn page and see what we've got here. Okay, so did LinkedIn start rounding corners again? I swear they weren't rounding corners not that long ago. They keep changing things all the time, which is great because LinkedIn just keeps getting better and better and better all the time. Not fast enough for me, but it is better all the time. By the way, any of you who have names that are hard to pronounce, see that little recording thing right there? You can record your name so that people can click on this and then hear how it's supposed to be said, which is useful for people like Shlomo Freund and people like Josh Steimle. So, except I say Steimle, but in Germany they say Steimle. So, okay. So Shlomo says, I'm only asking about the cover because of the book. Right. Okay. So okay, first glance, it looks good. I'll tell you, this over here actually fades away from me. My eye doesn't go to it. You speaking over here, I mean, I see it if I look at it. If I start studying the banner, it's just not something that I see immediately. The other thing I'd say here is that this speaking shot, it doesn't look like there are that many people there. So if I'm using a speaking shot, generally it's because I want to make it look a little bit more impressive. And with this, because it's only because of the way it's cut off in the group and there's this large space there, it makes it look like there are like 12 people there. And so because it kind of fades away anyway, and also you've got a lot of elements going on here. You've got one photo, two photo, you've got the book on this mobile screen, you've got the stripes, you've got the text. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So I'm already looking for ways to simplify this so that we can draw attention to what you really want to focus on. So I think this speaking shot is actually a bit better than this one because although it doesn't show the audience, obviously you're there speaking. And so if it were me, I'd probably get rid of this photo on the left. I'd stretch the stripes all the way to the end here. I would take out the probably all this white text down here. I'd remove because it's a lot of stuff there and you can say all this down here. You don't need to say it up there in the banner. And I would probably just put the focus on the book. And I think I'm going to say you could probably remove the logo here because we got the logo 3 times in here. We don't have to hit them over the head too many times with that. And in fact, I'd probably remove the logo. I'd probably remove the phone version here, and I would just have the printed book up there. And if you really wanted to simplify it, take out both of your photos there, have the stripes black or white, red, black, put the book over here on the right side, and that's it. Just the book cover and the stripes and nothing else. That would be the more simple and to the point banner there that would actually attract more attention to the book. Because with all this activity, your eye is dancing all over the place here, and you can actually skip over the book pretty easily. So that's probably the way that I would do that. And then I would, yeah. That's probably the way that I do it. And then, oh, good, you've got this book down here, the contribution down here. So that's good. Because if people are curious about the book, they're going to scroll down to see more. And if they see that, then they see, oh, okay, yeah, I can learn more about it there. So that's my feedback on that quick version. Okay, we've got 6 minutes left. Who's got some questions? What are people getting hung up on? What do you need? What would help you to make progress right now on your book? Elenia says, I've talked with the developmental editor and explained my book situation, and they mentioned that for a quality book and knowing all the processes that need to be taken into consideration, June deadline to have my book in my hand is way too aggressive. It depends on all the processes and how you're going to do it. I mean, it depends on the details, but and it depends on how much time you have to spend on it. But could you have it done by June? Absolutely. I mean, you could have this done in 2 months. You could have this done in 3 months. You can have this done in 6 months. Now, obviously, it's going to take more work to have it done in 2 months versus 6 months, but I don't think that it's that unrealistic to say it's going to be done by June. But that's, again, your developmental editor probably knows a little bit more about the details of what you're talking about with the processes. So let me know are there any specific things, Elenia, that you feel like are going to take the longest, or where do they feel like most of that time is going to be spent? So, by the way, regarding that sound of your name on LinkedIn, Leif says that he just checked and you have to be on the mobile version of LinkedIn to record your name. So if you want to record your name, then use the mobile app on LinkedIn to record that. Okay. Elenia might be typing in a follow-up to that right now, but if you've got other questions, get them in there in the Q&A right now, and let's get them answered. By the way, have you all been listening to the Published Author podcast? I hope you are, because I'm interviewing successful authors and ghostwriters and other people who are in the book industry. And so many of the questions that come up here during these Q&As are being answered by these guests on the podcast. And they've got their own stories and different perspectives than I have. And so there are different answers being shared. So if you haven't yet listened to the podcast, definitely go check out the Published Author podcast. By the end of this week, we'll have 8 episodes live. We'll be releasing another 3 next week. And there's some really interesting stuff in there. I think, Shlomo, you were asking last week about speaking, and Jeff Butler's episode, I think, is live or is going live very soon. And he's a professional speaker. He does, well, before the pandemic, he was doing 60, 70 events per year. He was making like 400, 500 grand US per year from paid speaking engagements. And so I talk with him a little bit about that and how a book has helped him out with his speaking career and how his speaking career has helped his books. And he also has an interesting story about turning down a book deal that a major publisher offered him and why he turned it down. So that's some interesting stuff there in the podcast. And I would super appreciate it if you go on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the podcast. That will help it to show up in a lot more searches and get more traffic to it. So Elenia's follow-up. So the editor said a few weeks to do her job. Then there is to do the copy editing, the proofreading, the marketing side. I'm still writing, just about to start my second chapter. I also have the layer of getting approval from all the companies that I'm still interviewing. Yeah, I think you could get this done faster, Elenia, but again, there's no need to rush it unless you have a need, unless you have to have this book out by June. But as far as this coaching and this course goes, you're a lifetime member, so there's no rush necessarily for anybody. If you want me to make you feel rushed because it helps you, I'll hold you accountable and I'll push you. But there's no rush in terms of what you have access to here with the coaching or the course or anything, because you're all lifetime members. So, take your time if you want to, but you definitely could have this done faster. But if you're starting your second chapter and you think it's going to take you another 2 or 3 months to finish writing the book, then yeah, I can see how it's going to take a little bit longer because you have to go through all that stuff after that. But if you could kick the book out in the next month and get a full first vomit draft done and then a second draft done, then there's not a lot of work after that point to get it polished up. But again, I mean, this all depends on whether you really want to move fast. You don't have to, but if you want to, we can help you move faster. If you feel like you're working at a good pace and you're okay with the book being released in July or August or September, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. If anybody's got one last question, we can sneak it in here really quick. Otherwise, we're going to wrap things up. But does anybody have one last question that they want to get in before we sign off? Okay, we're going to do a little countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm finishing up that checklist. I'll be working on it tonight. I'll be working on it tomorrow. I'm working on the workbook. And I will be getting that to you ASAP. Trust me, I want to get this done just as much as you want me to get it done. So we'll be getting that done soon and have that out to you. Until then, put all your questions in the Facebook group and we'll see you here next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.